For full context, I should mention that I have a hearing disability, which has made me hard of hearing. There are moments in life I'll never fully understand, yet I often reflect on them, wondering what could have been different and how I might have acted. This particular experience happened about a year ago. The holiday season had just wrapped up, and I was finally settling back into my routine after the whirlwind of traveling and family gatherings. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood on the edge of a forest in southern Quebec. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, and honestly, I love that. It gives the community a cozy, familiar feeling. During winter, I enjoy taking my dog Monty on walks through the local forest. He's a Rottweiler Husky mix, a perfect companion for my occasional runs and long strolls. The forest has a network of easy trails, ideal for casual walkers like me. I remember that afternoon vividly. I had just finished a late lunch and wanted to stretch my legs while helping Monty burn off some energy. As we turned the corner toward the forest entrance, Monty went absolutely ballistic. His excitement was contagious. The February air was cold but crisp, and a fresh layer of snow had blanketed the paths overnight, creating a pristine canvas. I let Monty off his leash, knowing he would enjoy running freely. Along the trail, I noticed a few yellow patches in the snow and scattered boot prints, evidence that others had walked their dogs earlier. Most people prefer morning walks, as the sun in February tends to dip below the horizon around 4 p.m., so I wasn't expecting to encounter anyone. After about 30 minutes of walking, we reached a fork in the path. One trail looked untouched, beckoning me with the promise of a mini adventure, so I decided to take it. My memory of the forest trails is strong, so I felt confident navigating the new path. It eventually led to a small clearing, a perfect spot to observe native birds with binoculars I had received for Christmas. As I scanned the tree line, something unusual caught my eye, a strange shape in the distance. Bringing the binoculars up, I realized it was a blue tarp stretched over what looked like a makeshift shelter. Curiosity tugged at me, urging me to investigate further, but the daylight was fading, and I knew it was time to head home. With a last glance, I turned back, Monty trotting happily beside me, unaware that the forest had just shared a secret I would remember for a long time. As usual, Monty ran ahead, but something felt off in his behavior. He was unusually alert, sniffing the snow-covered trail with more intensity than I had ever seen before. My curiosity piqued. I looked down and froze. There was a set of footprints in the snow, much larger than my own. Confused, I lifted my boots and compared them to the prints. They didn't match at all. There were no other paths or forks nearby, which meant whoever had made them must have crossed my route at some point. I reasoned they probably passed while I was distracted with my binoculars. It made sense at the time, so I tried to calm myself and not overthink it. The daylight was fading quickly, but I could still make out the outlines of trees and snow-laden branches around me. As we walked back, Monty suddenly froze and barked relentlessly, his hackles raised. My stomach tightened as I turned, and that's when I saw him. A man easily 6'4", stood only a meter away, wearing charcoal snow pants and a white camouflage jacket. He didn't move toward me or make any sudden gestures. He simply stood there, hands tucked into his pockets, watching me. I didn't recognize him from the neighborhood, so I assumed he must be a hiker or someone passing through. He seemed to be muttering something, but the dim light and my inability to hear clearly made it impossible to understand whether he was speaking English or French. I cursed myself for not bringing my phone. Hesitant but trying to stay calm, I gestured, explaining that I was hard of hearing and that it was getting late. The tension hung in the air until Monty tugged me forward, and I finally hurried home. By the time I returned, it was around 4:30 p.m., and darkness had fully settled over the neighborhood. I followed my usual nighttime routine, telling myself the encounter was over and trying to push the lingering unease from my mind. But later that night, something happened that still haunts me. I woke to Monty licking my hand, a gesture he usually reserved for waking me in the morning. Groggy, I reached for my phone to check the time. 30:00 a.m. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed a message from my neighbor asking if everything was all right. At first, I was puzzled. Why would they be checking on me now? My confusion quickly turned into a sinking feeling I couldn't shake. The message was only a few minutes old, asking if everything was okay since Monty had been barking like something had possessed him. I looked up from my phone and realized Monty was no longer in my room. My stomach dropped as I hurried downstairs, only to find him barking hysterically at the patio door. My eyes were still blurry from sleep and adrenaline, making it hard to focus. Then the motion sensor light clicked on, and my heart sank to my feet. The man from the forest was standing in my backyard, silent and imposing. Questions didn't even form in my mind. I knew I needed to act. I stepped back, hands trembling, and texted 9911. I've never typed that fast in my life. I ran upstairs, Monty at my heels, and grabbed the machete I kept under my bed. I'm a shorter woman, trained in martial arts, but I know better than anyone that sometimes the best defense is not engaging at all. I positioned myself in the corner of my room, Monty close by, eyes darting toward the door. Minutes crawled by, every creak and whisper of wind amplifying my fear. Then Monty sprang up, barking like I'd never heard before. A shadow stretched under the bedroom door. The nightlight flickered on it, and my heart raced with the thought that the man was mere seconds from breaking in. Those minutes, stretched, endless, and terrifying, felt like an eternity. Then, mercifully, a siren pierced the darkness. The police had arrived. I explained everything as they searched the property. The patio glass was completely shattered, but thankfully, nothing else was missing, and the house was otherwise untouched. They found the backyard gate wide open, leading directly into the forest, the route they believed the man had taken to escape. I told them about the makeshift shelter I had seen the day before. While the patio door was being repaired, I stayed with a family friend, bringing Monty and a few essentials with me. I never received a follow-up from the police, but that night changed me. Now, whenever I walk Monty, we stick to the roads, leaving the forest and the questions it holds behind, choosing safety over curiosity. My name is Ember, and I'm a 16-year-old girl living in Illinois with my younger sister, Kate, who's 15. Our dad works for a deforestation group about 30 minutes from our house, so mornings at home are usually pretty quiet. December 5th started off like any other day, with Kate and me getting ready to head out to the movies. We decided to catch the new horror film, Terrifier 3, which surprisingly had some Christmas scenes thrown in. Even though it was rated way teen plus, neither of us really cared. We looked older than our age anyway, so sneaking in was easy. Everything was fine until halfway through the film, when my phone buzzed loudly enough for the entire theater to hear. The screen lit up, everyone turned to glare at me, and my sister and I panicked, trying to slip out. Of course, I tripped on the way out, which made it even worse. Once we were outside, I finally checked my phone. It was my dad. Instead of a call, there was a text. "Hey, would you mind bringing me some lunch since the small cafe in the woods is closed today?" Kate and I exchanged confused looks, but it seemed normal enough, so we didn't think twice. Back at home, we quickly packed some food and headed out in my car toward the woods. I've always loved that place. It's large, quiet, and beautiful, with a hill leading down to a lake that's perfect for fishing and photography. Nothing there had ever made me feel uneasy. After parking, Kate and I walked down the winding path through the trees. I pulled out my phone to call Dad, but there was no answer. Something felt off. I glanced at Kate. She mirrored my confusion. Why wouldn't he pick up if he'd just texted us? I quickly shot him a message, reminding him we were in the woods with his lunch. Moments later, the little typing dots appeared on the screen, and he replied, instructing us to walk down the small hill and wait for him at the lake. We followed his directions, the forest growing quieter with each step. The sun was already dipping low, and winter made the sunset come far earlier than usual, casting long shadows that stretched eerily across the snow-dusted ground. The sky glowed a brilliant orange, the light spilling over the hill and down the mountain, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted forest. I snapped out of my thoughts when Kate pointed toward the lake. A man dressed entirely in black was sitting on the deck by the water, his back to us. At first, we thought it was Dad. Hesitant, we walked down a little closer, stopping just behind him. I called his name, but he didn't move. Kate's unease grew, and her nervous energy made the scene feel even stranger. Slowly, I reached out and pulled off the hood he was wearing, revealing a man who definitely wasn't our dad. Kate and I shrieked as he turned around, grinning wildly while waving our dad's phone like some twisted trophy. His smile was terrifying, a mixture of delight and malice, clearly enjoying our fear. I demanded to know why he had our dad's phone, but he didn't answer. Instead, he lunged, grabbing Kate's arm as she screamed. Adrenaline surged through me, and I yanked her free. We bolted down the path, our legs moving faster than I'd ever seen, heart pounding in our chests. Behind us, the sound of heavy stomps echoed, proof we were being chased. I didn't dare look back. Every second felt like an eternity until finally we burst out of the trees and reached the car. I slammed the door shut, locking it as the man reached for the window, crouching out of sight as I started the engine. With a surge of panic-fueled energy, I reversed and sped away, the forest quickly disappearing in the rearview mirror. When we finally got home, Mom and Dad were there, panic on their faces. Gasping for breath, we explained everything. Dad was furious, explaining that his phone had been stolen while he was at work. The man had used it to trick us into coming to the woods. Dad immediately called the police and filed a report. Using the IMEI number, the officers tracked the phone. It was still on the lake deck and returned it to him. There wasn't much else they could do, since the phone was recovered. I thought that might be the end of it, but I wouldn't be telling this story if it were. 6 hours later, around Funchildredem, I received an unknown message. "I like that your house is lit only by your bedroom TV." A chill ran down my spine, and I felt my face go pale. I froze, paused the TV, and immediately heard rustling outside my window. My bedroom was on the second floor. Heart pounding, I shut my phone and strained to listen. Slowly, I peeked through the blinds and froze in terror. The man was there, smiling, a gun pressed against my window. I screamed and stumbled back as the glass exploded across my room in jagged shards. My parents and Kate rushed in, and I screamed for them to crouch, warning that the man was outside with a gun. When Dad cautiously went to check, he was gone. Then came another loud crash, glass shattering in the kitchen downstairs. We bolted to lock ourselves in the bedroom, Kate trembling as she dialed 911. Mom wrapped us in a tight embrace as we cried, fear coursing through our bodies. Through it all, I couldn't stop thinking, how did he even know where we lived? Minutes later, the police arrived, combing the house from top to bottom, but found no one. Kate and I explained everything again, and one officer suggested checking the car. Shockingly, a small AirTag was discovered on my tire. That explained how he tracked us, and why he crouched in the woods before I sped away. The officers assured us they would patrol the neighborhood and do everything possible to find him. Months passed, and though he was never caught, he never returned, a small relief that I hope never changes. Even now, my parents, Kate, and I are haunted by that night, but as the older sister, I mostly feel guilty for not questioning his strange texts sooner. That experience changed me. I'll never again venture into secluded areas without caution, especially when someone else's safety is my responsibility. Every time I see a darkened path or an unfamiliar shadow, I'm reminded of how close we came, and how quickly a normal night can turn into a night fear. One word to describe my day: hectic. Work had been non-stop chaos. This was peak COVID time, so I was stuck working from home. I was supposed to be meeting my extended family upstate, but I only finally logged off a nearly 3-hour Zoom meeting an hour and a half after everyone else had already arrived at my parents' house. And that didn't even include the 2-hour drive ahead. I poured myself 2 large cups of coffee in the kitchen before leaving. God knew I'd need the caffeine. The moment I opened my front door, I realized this drive would be more challenging than I expected. Snow and wind had picked up. The streets were barely plowed, and at least 2 feet of snow had already accumulated. The forecast promised more snow through the night, meaning I'd have to crawl under 25 mph on most residential roads. My car, a beat-up old Hyundai, was far from ideal for these conditions, lacking even antique lock brakes. I'm usually a fast driver, so once I hit the highway, I pushed the speed up to 70 mph. Probably far too fast for the conditions. Headlights cut through the thick snowfall, blurred lines on the icy road making each moment tense. The wind howled, snow whipped across the windshield, and every curve felt like a risk. My heart raced as I fought to keep control, the dark highway stretching endlessly ahead, danger lurking in every shadow. I finally pulled into my parents' driveway around 9:00 p.m. They had started dinner without me, but thankfully weren't too far along. A few drinks and gift exchanges later, I lost track of time, getting swept up in conversations with relatives I hadn't seen in ages. Before I knew it, most of my family had left, and I still had the drive home ahead of me. By the time I climbed back into my car, it was past midnight, and another foot of snow had settled on the ground. I was a little buzzed, but felt sober enough to drive. Not that I condone drinking and driving, just exhausted and desperate to get home. The roads were eerily empty, giving me a false sense of security. Forests flanked both sides, no lights or houses in sight, only the beam of my headlights cutting through the blizzard. I increased my speed to 40 mph, heart thumping, each crunch of snow under my tires echoing in the silence. Then, approaching a bend, the car suddenly began to skid. Panic surged as I tried to regain control. the snow-covered road turning the night into a claustrophobic trap. In a heart-stopping moment, the car slid straight off the road and slammed into a tree. The airbag deployed, and for a second, everything went silent. I was stunned by the force of the impact, but miraculously, I was relatively unharmed. My car, however, was ruined, the entire hood buried in a snowbank surrounding the tree. I sat there for a moment, heart pounding, realizing how close I had come to something far worse. There was no chance I was getting the car back onto the road. The first thing I did was call my roadside assistance company, and they told me they'd dispatch a truck immediately. Because of the brutal weather conditions, though, they warned it could take up to 40 minutes to reach me. I was stranded on a completely deserted road, forest on both sides, with no houses or lights for miles in either direction. That realization didn't sit well with me, so I called my parents and asked if one of them could come out and wait with me. My dad said he'd get in the car right away and head over. I hung up and sat there, listening to the wind batter the trees and rock my car slightly. That's when I heard something else, something that didn't belong. Beneath the howl of the wind, there were footsteps crunching through the snow. I couldn't tell exactly where they were coming from, only that they sounded distant. I cracked open the driver's door and stepped out, peering over the roof of my car. The footsteps had stopped. Instead, a new sound reached my ears, wet, uneven, almost like a slurping noise. It was hard to describe, but it made my skin crawl. I looked toward the tree line where the sound seemed to be coming from and noticed movement. It was pitch black, but I was fairly certain I was looking at a person. I called out hello. Instantly, the sound stopped. No reply followed. I stood there for a few uncomfortable seconds, waiting for someone to speak or step forward, but nothing happened. No movement. No sound. My nerves were shot, so I got back into the car and locked the doors. Less than a minute later, the footsteps returned, closer this time. Then something struck the passenger side window, like a rock or some solid object hitting the glass. I couldn't see anything out that side because snow covered all the windows. Heart pounding, I opened the driver's door again and stepped out, scanning my surroundings. That's when I noticed them, boot prints circling my car, looping around it before leading away from the passenger door and straight into the woods. My stomach dropped. Then I saw the blood. Dark droplets stained the snow. Fighting nausea, I opened the glove compartment and pulled out my 9mm. Gripping it tightly, I followed the prints into the trees, convinced beyond doubt that I wasn't alone out there. As I moved deeper into the woods, the drops of blood grew larger and more frequent. It looked like something had been bleeding heavily. Then I noticed a dark shape lying in the snow just beyond the tree line. I couldn't tell what it was at first, and all I could think was, please don't be a person. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. It wasn't human. It was a dead deer, torn apart like it had been slaughtered by a much larger predator. Its stomach had been ripped wide open, and what shocked me most was that the deer had been completely decapitated. I swept my light across the area, expecting to see the head nearby, but it was nowhere to be found. That was enough for me. Every instinct in my body screamed to leave, and I backed away toward my car. When I reached the driver's side door and pulled it open, I nearly threw up on the spot. Sitting in the driver's seat was the severed head of the deer, carefully placed as if it were staring straight at me. Panic took over. I ran down the road, not even looking back, until headlights appeared in the distance. I waved my arms and shouted like a lunatic, still clutching my handgun. Thankfully, it was my dad. He slammed on the brakes and demanded to know what the hell I was doing. I jumped into the passenger seat and told him everything, but I could tell he didn't believe a word of it. Even so, I felt safer going back with him. He drove us back to my car, and we both got out. The boot prints were still there, circling the vehicle, but the deer's head was gone. All that remained was a large, dark stain of blood soaking into the driver's seat. That's when my dad finally went quiet. I think that's when it hit him that I wasn't lying. The deer's body was gone too, leaving only drag marks etched into the snow leading back toward the woods. Not long after, the tow truck arrived and hauled my car away. My dad asked if I wanted to call the police, but I was completely drained. I just wanted to go home and sleep. I doubted a report would change anything anyway. So that's my story. I still don't know who or what was out there that night, or what they wanted from me. Maybe it was meant to scare me, or maybe something far worse was being planned.